My mother was named Ruby Thompson, but after she married, she became Rubio. And if you like that alliteration, it gets even better, or worse, as the case may be, because my father's name was Rudolph, or Rudy, and so they were Ruby and Rubio. Okay. Anyway, if that seems far-fetched to you, I swear on our 7UU principles that it's absolutely true. Throughout my youth, my mother faced some dire circumstances, including my father's alcoholism, domestic abuse, and significant financial insecurity. Yet through it all, she kept her 5 children fed, clothed, housed, and loved. And one of the most striking things about that in retrospect is that I rarely heard her complain. Sure, she would yell at us and tell us we could all be replaced by inanimate objects when we broke a lamp playing football in the living room. But she never complained about the bigger things in her life. I asked her once about this. She told me that she was feeling down one day about her failing marriage and said something about it to a woman she knew at the pharmacy counter. That woman responded that she had just learned that her 2 daughters had a rare genetic condition and that they'd both be blind in a few years. My mom told me that that had really put her troubles into perspective and reminded her that there are many other people who have things way worse to bear than we do. So we shouldn't complain, and we should do our best to help others. So let me share 3 stories that illustrate this larger connecting theme of her life: empathy, compassion, and service to others. My mother was fabulous with children, even when she didn't know them. I saw this one night in a hospital waiting room. I was home from college over the holidays one year and somehow developed a very nasty case of bronchitis. So my mom and I went to the hospital emergency room. Also in the room waiting were a youngish couple with a child. The couple looked quite distraught. Before long, a doctor appeared and asked to talk to them. They stepped into the other room with the doctor, leaving the child playing on the floor. They returned after a few moments, and both were weeping. Clearly, they had just received some devastating news. I don't know how we came to the conclusion, but my mother and I both surmised that it was a second child who was being treated, and that the prognosis was very bad. They weren't sure what to do because they needed to go into the ER to be with their other child, but couldn't take the first child with them. My mom sprang into action and offered to watch the child. She introduced herself to him and told him that she was a teacher who knew lots of good games and stories. She plopped herself down on the floor and pulled out her purse. Now, let me tell you, my mom had an amazing purse. To this day, my 3 grown daughters talk about how much they loved it when they and Grandma would explore the treasures of lipstick, gum, and old coins they found therein. And they would always walk away from that ritual with one of the treasures to call their own. That night, it was someone else's child who experienced the wonders of Grandma's purse. And that was my mom in spades. On the worst night of that young couple's life, my mother rolled up her shirt sleeves and did what was necessary to help complete strangers. Another example of her service to others came after her retirement. She became a California State certified domestic violence counselor and legal advocate. She helped scores of women and their children flee dangerous situations, dangerous domestic situations, and after moving them to a safe location, often driving them quite far to a shelter out of town, she would help them explore their options, obtain restraining orders for them, and would speak for them in court. As I said, this was dangerous work, and she often put herself in harm's way doing it. My siblings and I became concerned for her safety, and we insisted that we buy and install a phone in her car. And remember, this was the 1980s when car phones were rare, big, clunky, and expensive. but she got it just in time, as it turned out. Soon afterward, she was driving a battered woman on a lonely desert road when a car drove up behind and started tailgating them. The woman gasped when she recognized it as her husband's car. Somehow he had figured out where they were going and in whose car. The car began honking and driving erratically, trying to get them to pull over. Who knows what might have happened had my mother not been able to call the police from her car. Before long, a squad car caught up with them, pulled the husband over, and arrested him. But that scary incident didn't stop my mom from continuing with that very important work. And one final story of my mother's service to others. My mother found her calling as an elementary school teacher, touching many hundreds of students' lives. I don't remember why I was with her one day at the school administration office, but someone in the office addressed her by her name, and a young man nearby did a double take. He came up to my mom and asked, "Are you Rubio?" She told him yes, and he proceeded to tell her how happy he was to finally meet her. He explained that he was a social worker and that he had been working with a teenager who had experienced much family trauma. And yet the teen was doing remarkably well, all things considered. The social worker had asked the young person how she managed to be so resilient, and this is what she said. "When I was in first grade, I had a teacher, Mrs. Rubio, who always told me how special I was, and that even though I was facing some problems, I was a strong girl and my life was going to turn out okay. So when things aren't going very well, I just remember what Mrs. Rubio told me." My mom asked the social worker the girl's name, but my mom didn't recognize it. She was embarrassed about that and took it as a sign of her poor memory that she didn't remember the incident or the name. I, however, took it differently. My theory is that my mom didn't remember the girl because it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. That was just how she interacted with every one of her students. I've never been prouder of my mom than I was in that moment. These are just 3 examples of the many I could give about how my mother modeled the important principles of empathy, compassion, and service to others. And by living her life in this manner, she gave me some very important tools to lead a happy, successful life. Thank you, Mom. Happy Heavenly Mother's Day.
Today is not just Mother's Day for me. It's my birthday. Okay, I tell you that, I tell you that not just to get some applause, right? Although that was very nice, and thank you very much. No, I tell you that because today marks the first time in my life that my mother forgot my birthday. When my 3 brothers and I began to move out of our family home, my parents began a tradition of our father calling us, usually very early in the day, Crosby's our early risers, to sing a rendition of Happy Birthday in his booming baritone voice, ending with some special flourish. Happy birthday to you. You get the idea. Okay, so although my father sang the birthday greetings, I'm quite confident that my mother reminded him of the day and probably dialed the number and handed him the phone. For decades, my mother planned birthday parties, baked birthday cakes, prepared special birthday dinners, and basically demonstrated that the day of our birth was monumental for her. When my birthday fell on Mother's Day, she focused the celebration on me. But those days dwell in the past now. Both of my parents have been diagnosed with moderate dementia, And although they do not yet need 24/7 nursing care, we know that lurks in the near future. We just don't know how near. Roles. We play a lot of roles in our lives. Daughter, teacher, friend, aunt, mother. Roles play an important role in our lives. Roles are a type of cognitive schema, a framework of expectations that guide our behavior. Individuals with the role of mother don't always fit neatly into the socially defined role, but my mother did. In particular, my mother always provided me with a layer of protection from the harshness of the world. If I didn't know what to do about something, my mother would know. If a crisis erupted, my mother would help me out. When I went into labor 3 months early and needed to be hospitalized for almost my entire 3rd trimester, my mother moved up to Canton from Savannah for the next 2.5 months to allow Grant, Aoife's dad, to continue working. She would sit by my hospital bed, listening to Aoife's quick little heartbeat, and keep me company. She made the whole ordeal less scary. When she left a week after Aoife's birth, I bawled. My layer of protection was leaving, and I was terrified. But now I've become my mother's layer of protection. Mom, you don't need to worry about the doctor's bill. I've taken care of it. Mom, let me take care of the wash while I'm here. Mom, let's go to the store. I think it's time we get you some new pajamas. I don't want to be her layer of protection. I want her to be mine. This role switch did not come easily for me. I went into it kicking and screaming. I would have arguments with my brothers about who was worse off, Mom or Dad. What a stupid thing to argue about. They would argue that Mom had gotten worse than Dad. I would throw around my PhD in psychology and try to convince them that Mom's memory loss was typical age-related memory impairment, while Dad's dementia represented a complete inability to process information. However, when a back injury landed my mom in the hospital and then rehab for 3 weeks, the extent of her mental decline could not be ignored. No more denial. So how do we cope when these roles that we hold switch, morphing into something very different? I'll share 2 strategies that I'm trying to follow. Neither is profound, but they seem to be helping. Sometimes what's helpful is not particularly profound. First, I try to remember that transitions like these are the norm, not an aberration. Knowing that what we are going through is typical, not atypical, means that many individuals surround us with whom we can share our story and from whom we can gain support and wisdom. So I talk to people, including many of you. Second, I've tried to lean into the shift in my role. A friend of mine finds the phrase lean into funny, and he laughs whenever I use it. But I think it's particularly fitting when we're talking about a change in familial roles. When I was in that state of denial and arguing with my brothers, I was leaning away from my mom. But what my mom needs, and what I need too, is to lean in, not lean away. I need to think about what she needs from me as well as what I can still receive from her. Like that moment when she sees me after a while and her smile makes clear the unconditional love that she feels for me. She may not be able to provide a layer of protection from the harsh realities of the world, but she can still make me feel special. Even if she doesn't remember, it's my birthday. So I need to lean in, and that's what I'm trying to do. Because I need to lean in so I can embrace the person my mother